This is a personal situation for you as a Cuban American. What's your reaction today to this news that 60 or so years of a standoff between these two countries has thawed a bit?
Yeah, to me personally, Randy, it's tremendous news because this had to come. This time had to come. You look back to the late 80s, 1990, when the Cold War basically ended and the normalization of relations between the old Soviet Union, now Russia, and the United States. Nothing but good has come from that. It's not that antagonistic ideals that used to exist, you know, when we were younger growing up, things like that. So me personally, obviously being Cuban American, somebody who was born only 3 weeks after my folks arrived from Cuba, you know, basically I always tell people I was made in Cuba, but it basically is tremendous because it is something that was necessary in terms of both countries. Yes, obviously the U.S. has the upper hand, but in terms of visiting Cuba a couple of times like I did and seeing what the system was like and knowing the potential that was there, knowing the potential from speaking to my parents, my grandparents, who knew what Cuba used to be. I mean, it used to be such a vibrant place and a vibrant economy, and the people had things that we take for granted here, but those were all commonplace in Cuba. By no means was it a third world country. So for me, if this does in fact lead to truly normalized relations, and Cuba is opened up and it does become a democratic society once again, this is nothing but great news if you're a Cuban who is here in the U.S. or if you're a Cuban who is still in Cuba.
Pedro, would you go there if there is a normalization of not only relations but also maybe a lift on the travel embargo? Would you make the trip?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to visit twice, Randy. Once was in 1999 when the Orioles played in Havana, and I went as a journalist when I was still working at the Arizona Republic as a newspaper writer. And the other time was in 2008 when I went with ESPN because the U.S. was playing Cuba in a CONCACAF qualifying match to qualify for the World Cup. And both times I was able to go to my father's neighborhood where he grew up. I was able to visit the people who he grew up with, and they were shocked at the developments that had happened to me because they remembered my mother being pregnant, and they couldn't believe it. Like, oh my God, that's you. That's you now that were in your mother's body back then. So there was a lot of emotion tied to that. I would absolutely love to take my children to Cuba because it's so important for them to know their heritage and their history.